Silas Granger had made peace with dying. At 64, he'd already carved his name into a wooden cross and dug his own grave behind the barn. The land he once called home had long since stopped giving back. His cattle were sold off to cover debts that only grew heavier. His wife Martha's garden had turned to dust years ago, and even the old oak tree they'd carved their initials into was splitting in half, decaying from the inside out, just like him. Each morning greeted him with silence and the sting of regret. His beard had grown wild, and the only companion he allowed was the half-empty bottle of whiskey beside his chair. That morning felt different, like a farewell. Silas sat on the porch, rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on the barren stretch of prairie. And then, from the stillness, came the unmistakable rattle of chains. Faint, metallic, and drifting like a ghost on the wind. He straightened, weathered hands tightening around the rifle. Chains never meant anything good this far from civilization. Through the shimmering heat, a figure stumbled forward, small, frail, and broken in her gait. As she emerged from the tall grass, his breath caught. A girl, no older than 16. Her black hair matted with blood and dust, wrists bound in iron shackles that had rubbed her skin raw. Her once blue dress hung in shreds, stained with things Silas didn't want to name. She was Chinese, and out here that only meant one thing: property. Someone's possession. Someone's profit. And now she'd collapsed on his land. She locked eyes with him, hers dark and drowning in terror. Her lips moved, forming foreign words, but he understood her all the same. "Help me." Then she fell to her knees, the chains clanging sharply against the hard earth. Silas stood over her, torn. He'd planned to die quiet and forgotten, with no one left to mourn him. But this girl, this brutalized, voiceless girl, had changed all of that. Helping her would be suicide. Leaving her would be worse. A sound broke through the stillness, hoofbeats. Multiple riders closing in fast. Whoever owned her was already on the trail. The old rancher tightened his grip on the rifle. 5 horses, maybe more, he counted. More than he could face with one aging weapon and trembling hands. He looked down. She had pulled herself up on her elbows, blood dripping from her brow. The chain between her wrists had cut so deep he could see bone. Then came the voice. Harsh, crude, and all too familiar. Chinese ran this way. Tracks head straight for that ranch. Silas went cold. Brutus Cain. A name soaked in filth. Cain was infamous for trafficking girls, buying them from shipyards in San Francisco, selling them to mining towns like livestock. If this girl had belonged to Cain, her scars were deeper than any man could see. The riders crested the hill, 5 of them. Cain led the pack, a mountain of a man whose pale eyes scoured Silas's property like a wolf scanning for prey. His voice thundered across the yard. "You seen a Chinese girl, old man?" "'Bout 16. Blue dress. Mine." Silas rose slowly, rifle still in hand. "Ain't seen no one but you boys ruining my quiet," he replied. Cain's eyes narrowed. His men spread out, resting their hands casually on the butts of their guns. These weren't cowboys. These were executioners. Cain dismounted. "Funny. Tracks lead straight to your porch. Girl's bleeding too. Leaves a trail a corpse could follow." The girl whimpered at Silas's feet. He could feel her shaking against his boot. Above them, buzzards circled, as if sensing the violence about to erupt. "My land, my business," Silas said, voice dry as dust. "Didn't invite company." Cain gave a humorless grin. "I respect your land, Granger, but that girl cost me $2,000 in Frisco. I'm not leaving without her." The sun climbed higher, thickening the air with heat and tension. Silas's heart thudded hard against his ribs. He had stared down outlaws before, but that was a lifetime ago. Back when his hands were steady and he still had something to fight for. Cain stepped closer, casting a shadow over the girl. "Here's how this goes. You move aside, we take what's ours, and no harm comes to you. You live. Simple." But Silas looked into the girl's face again. Saw in her the same fragile desperation Martha once wore when life had cornered them. That silent plea for someone to be brave. Metal whispered against leather as Cain's men drew their weapons. 5 against 1. One old man. One chained girl. Silas raised his rifle. Found Cain's chest with effortless precision. "Ain't nobody here but us," he said. "You boys best ride on." The air stilled. The girl had gone silent. Even the buzzards seemed to hold their breath. Cain laughed, low and cruel. "You got grit, Granger. I'll give you that. But 1 rifle against 5 men? Bad odds." "Maybe," Silas said calmly. "But I'll drop you before your boys even clear leather. That's a promise I'll keep in lead." For a moment, the world hovered on a blade's edge. Then Cain raised his hand, signaling his men to lower their guns. "Smart move would be to walk away," he said. "Let us take what's ours. No shame in surviving." "Never been much for smart moves," Silas replied. Cain stared at him. "You even know what that girl is? What she's done to survive? She's not like our women. She's trained. She's less than human." The girl's breath hitched, a sound like broken glass. Silas had heard men talk that way before. It was how they gave themselves permission to be monsters. "She's on my land," Silas said. "That makes her mine to protect." Cain spat into the dirt. "Last chance, Granger. I know you. I know you lost everything. You're just waiting to die out here. Maybe today's your day." The threat landed sharp and clear. But something had cracked open in Silas's chest. Something he hadn't felt since Martha was lowered into the ground. Purpose. And for the first time in 3 years, he had a reason to keep living that didn't come from the bottom of a bottle. "I appreciate the offer," Silas said coolly, "but I think I'll pass." Cain's face darkened, thunder brewing behind his eyes. With a silent nod, his men began to spread out, forming a deadly arc around the porch. The girl pressed closer to Silas, the sound of her chains a soft, desperate rattle. "Stubborn old fool," Cain muttered under his breath. "Boys, looks like we're doing this the hard way. When the shooting starts, keep him alive long enough to watch what we do to his little Chinese pet." But then the girl lifted her head. Her voice, though strained, rang out clear across the yard. "I know where the railroad gold is hidden." Cain froze mid-draw. His hand hovered inches from his revolver, his gaze snapping to her with a hunger that turned his face from cruel to possessed. "What did you just say?" Still on her knees, blood streaking her face, the girl forced the words past her lips. "The railroad payroll. Stolen 3 months ago. 20,000 in gold coins. I know where it is." Silas felt his pulse skip. Everyone in the territory had heard the story. The Aches Line payroll ambushed outside Deadwood Junction. Masked men.
No survivors.
$20,000 in gold eagles vanished. A reward had been posted $5,000 for even a scrap of information. And here was this chained girl, covered in blood and dirt, claiming she held the key. Cain dismounted slowly, suspicion mingling with greed. "You're lying. Just trying to save your skin." "The man who stole it, he brought me to the place. I saw it. I watched him count the coins. Said if I told, he'd cut out my tongue and sell me worse than before." "Who?" Cain demanded, his voice low and deadly. The girl glanced at Silas, then back to Cain. "Let me go. Horse, food, water. I tell you everything." Cain's laugh was different now. Less amused. More dangerous. "Clever girl. But you're not in a position to bargain. You'll tell me what I want to know. Then I'll take you back and make my money back the old-fashioned way." No, her voice had iron in it. "You kill me, you never find the gold. You take me back, I die anyway. Either way, you lose." Silas watched the exchange with growing dread. She was gambling with her life, and Cain wasn't the sort of man to play fair. He didn't need her to talk, he could just start cutting. Cain drew a long knife from his belt, the blade catching sunlight like fire. "Then we'll carve the truth out of you, starting with your fingers." Before he could move, the girl turned her eyes to Silas. "Help me," she pleaded. "I share with you. Half the gold. 10,000. Enough to save your ranch. Buy new cattle. Start again." Silas felt something shift in his chest. $10,000. More money than he'd ever seen. Enough to clear every debt, to make the land green again. Enough to bury the past with honor. Cain's voice roared. Old man, you listening? That gold belongs to whoever's smart enough to take it. But first, I'm collecting what's mine. And now the moment came. What would you do if you were Silas Granger? Trust a desperate girl with no proof but blood and broken chains, or stand aside and let the devil reclaim his due? Let me know in the comments. Because what Silas chose next would decide if he died a forgotten relic, or finally earned his redemption. The girl's eyes found his again. There was something in them. A secret. Maybe salvation. Maybe ruin. Cain's grip tightened on the knife, and in that breath between violence and silence, new hoofbeats rose in the distance. More riders. Fast. Determined. They crested the hill, 3 men, wearing dusters, their badges glinting in the sun. Railroad detectives. The law. Cain's snarl faded. He stepped back, sheathing his knife with a growl. Well now, he muttered. This just got complicated. The lead detective rode into the yard with slow, measured purpose. He was tall, hard-eyed, dressed in black. The kind of man who'd buried better gunfighters than Cain without blinking. I'm Detective Marshall Hawthorne, Aches Railroad, he said as he dismounted. We're tracking stolen property. Cain straightened, painting a smile over his rage. Just in time, Marshall. I was retrieving my runaway when this old man got in the way. Hawthorne's gaze drifted to the girl. Your property's been talking about railroad gold. The words hit like a gunshot. Cain's grin faltered. He hadn't expected company. Certainly not witnesses. She's lying, he muttered. Chinese'll say anything to stay alive. But Hawthorne had already dismounted, boots crunching the dirt. Thing is, we've tracked the missing payroll to this part of the territory. Funny how stolen money always ends up around interesting people. The girl staggered to her feet, chains clinking. I tell truth. Gold is not here. It's north. 2 days' ride. Shut your mouth, Cain snapped, stepping toward her. But Silas raised his rifle again, the barrel leveled squarely at Cain's chest. Told you once. She's under my protection. The yard froze, guns half drawn, eyes locked, a standoff as sharp as any the West had seen. Hawthorne's hand hovered at his side. Looks like we've got ourselves a situation. Slave trader, rancher, a girl with knowledge of 20,000 in stolen gold. Seems to me. We let the girl speak. Cain's face twisted. That girl's mine. I've got papers. Paper don't mean much when it's up against stolen federal property, Hawthorne shot back. $20,000 in gold trumps 2,000 in flesh. The girl's eyes danced between them all. She was calculating odds, weighing trust against survival. I make deal, she said. Whoever keeps me safe. I show gold. We split. Fair. Cain had heard enough. He drew on instinct. But the girl leaned into Silas, whispering fast and low. Old man, you help me, I tell you truth. Truth that changes everything. Her next words detonated like dynamite. The gold, it wasn't stolen. Silas blinked. What? It was an inside job, she said. A railroad man took it. Blamed it on robbers. Every man in the yard stiffened. Hawthorne's hand froze. A storm gathered behind his eyes. What did you say? He asked quietly. Cain sensed the shift, too. He smelled blood in the water. She's lying, trying to turn us on each other. But she stepped forward. The man who took me to see the gold, he wore a railroad badge. He knew the train schedule. Said the payroll would be lightly guarded. Hawthorne's face turned pale. His men exchanged glances. Hands drifted back to weapons. You have a name? Hawthorne asked, voice flat. Dangerous. The girl hesitated. One wrong answer could get her killed. She looked around the circle of armed men. If I tell you his name, you let me go free. All of you let me go and I disappear, the girl said firmly. You never see me again. Like hell? Cain growled. That girl's worth $2,000. I ain't leaving here empty-handed. But Hawthorne's eyes weren't on the girl anymore. They were on his own men. His expression shifting, suspicion now tightening around his thoughts like a noose. $20,000 in stolen gold was enough to turn any man. Enough to make even a railroad detective betray his oath. Marshal, one of the detectives, Johnson, spoke nervously, tension rising in his voice. We shouldn't be listening to some Chinese girl's fairy tales. Maybe not, Hawthorne answered, but his gun was already in hand. Steady, unspecific, but ready. But somebody knew about that payroll route. Knew exactly when the guards would be light. That's not a coincidence. Silas watched as the air thickened with danger. He felt like a man standing in a dry field full of gunpowder while everyone around him flicked matches. Beside him, the girl trembled. Whether from fear or exhaustion, he couldn't tell. There's more, she said, finding strength in desperation. The man who planned the robbery, he wasn't alone. He had a partner, someone high up in the railroad company. Someone who could change train schedules, who could make sure the right car was hit at the right time. Now Hawthorne's gun shifted. Slowly, deliberately, it began to aim toward his own men. Boys, he said coldly, I think we need to talk about loyalty. The two detectives backed apart, eyes narrowed, fingers twitching toward their holsters. Kane's men grew twitchy, their hands hovering at their sides. It wouldn't take much now, one blink, one mistake, and the whole yard would erupt. But the girl wasn't finished. The gold's not buried, she said. It's not in a cave. It never left railroad property. It's been hiding in plain sight the whole time. Where? Three voices demanded at once. She looked up at Silas. Her dark eyes were bottomless now. Pain, resolve, and something sharper. Old man, she said quietly, you still want to protect me? Because once I tell them, they won't need me alive. Silas felt the truth of it settle in his gut. Every man there could kill for $20,000. And once they had what they needed from her, she'd be no more useful than a spent bullet. I'll tell you where the gold is, she announced. But first, someone shoots these chains off my wrists. I die free, or I don't talk. The silence that followed was jagged as broken glass. Everyone waited. No one moved. The girl had lit the fuse. Kane barked out a bitter laugh. Girl, you think we're fools? You'll bolt the second those chains are gone. Where would I run? She snapped. You've got horses. I've got feet. But I won't die a slave. Hawthorne turned to his men, eyes sharp. Johnson, Martinez. Either of you want to explain how the robbers knew which train to hit? Johnson shifted uncomfortably. Marshal, you can't really believe this girl's stories. Stories have a funny way of being true when $20,000 vanishes into thin air, Hawthorne said. Martinez had gone pale. His hand crept toward his gun. Easy, Hawthorne warned. Let's keep this civil. Silas watched the whole scene like a man caught in the eye of a storm. These men were ready to kill each other for gold that might not even exist. But the girl beside him, her chains, her bruises, her fear, those were real. I'll shoot the chains, Silas said quietly. All heads turned. Kane's eyes blazed. You do that, old man, and I'll put a bullet between your eyes. Maybe, Silas said calmly, but you'll never find your gold. He knelt beside her. The iron shackles were tight, unforgiving. The lock was old, but tough. It would take a precise shot, one wrong move, and he could blow her hands clean off. You trust me? He asked. She met his eyes, and there, where fear should have been, he saw something else. I trust you, she whispered. You already chose to protect me. He lined up the barrel. Hold still. Wait, Hawthorne called. She talks first. Then we discuss her freedom. But the girl shook her head. I die free or I die a slave. Everyone aiming at someone. Enough, the girl cried. I'll tell you. The air froze. The gold. It never left the train. Every gun barrel shifted toward her. It's hidden in the false bottom of the mail car. The train's still at Atchison Depot, waiting for repairs that'll never happen. Hawthorne turned ghost white. That's impossible. We searched it. You searched where someone told you to, she replied. The inside man made sure you missed it. Then, she turned and stared directly at Martinez. Didn't he, partner? Martinez's hand shook. Sweat rolled down his face. She's lying, he said, trying to save herself. But Hawthorne was fitting the puzzle together. You searched the mail car, Martinez. You signed off on it. Because it was clean, Martinez shouted. I don't know what game this is, but I'm not part of it. The girl rose shakily to her feet. He came to the brothel after. Drunk. Bragging. Said he'd be rich. Said his partner would move the gold once the heat died down. Kane's instincts kicked in. He turned his gun on Martinez. Well, hell. Looks like we got a real thief in our midst. I'm not, Martinez began, but his nerves shattered. He spun, gun rising toward Hawthorne. Silas moved faster than thought. 40 years of frontier survival surged back. He tackled the girl to the dirt just as gunfire tore through the air. Martinez's shot went wide, shattering glass. Hawthorne's return fire struck true. Martinez spun, then dropped face down in the dust. Chaos erupted. Kane's men opened fire. Johnson went down, wounded near the horses. Bullets ripped through the dry morning air. Silas shielded the girl with his body, grabbing Kane's fallen knife and sawing through the chains at her wrists. Stay down, he yelled. One link snapped, then another. Kane, taking cover behind his horse, fired wildly. 2 of his men collapsed, their blood soaking into the earth. Finally, the girl's shackles broke free. Her wrists bled, but her eyes shone with freedom. I wasn't lying, she gasped. The gold's real. Don't matter now, Silas said, loading another round. These men will kill each other over it. Kane spotted them. You ain't getting away, old man. That girl's still mine. But Kane never saw Hawthorne coming. The marshal rounded the porch, his revolver roaring. Kane took 2 rounds, one in the shoulder. He tried to lift his gun. Silas was faster. His rifle cracked. Kane dropped hard, eyes wide and empty, staring up at a sky that no longer cared. And just like that, the silence returned. Hawthorne stood over Kane's body, gun still smoking. Johnson lay bleeding but alive. Kane's men were dead or dying. The storm had passed. The girl clung to Silas, shaking, finally free. It's over, Hawthorne said, his voice low. If the gold's where you say, the railroad will see you rewarded. But she was already backing away, fists clenched. I told the truth, she said. But I don't want reward money. Then what? Silas asked softly. She looked up at him, eyes that had seen too much pain and betrayal. I want to stay here, with you, help you rebuild the ranch, start again. Silas felt something inside him, something buried deep, start to thaw. This girl, this survivor, wanted to build a life with an old man the world had forgotten. Girl, he said gently, I don't even know your name. Leeway, she whispered. And I know yours. Silas Granger. Heard them say it. Good name. For a good man. As Hawthorne tended to his wounded and prepared to ride back to town, the conspiracy unraveled, the gold soon to be recovered. But for Silas and Leeway, the treasure wasn't $20,000. It was the chance to start again. As the sun rose over their battered land, Silas helped Leeway to her feet. Together, they walked toward the house, where 2 broken souls would learn to be whole again. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel and click on the video on screen now, because the next tale reveals a truth so powerful. It will change how you see courage forever. These frontier stories may end, but the spirit that survives them never does.